I'm Master Saturn. Thank you for joining me for another BDSM United podcast. We write books and we have lots of resources available at www.bdsmunited.com. And we've been doing this for over 12 years, 13 years maybe now. Yeah, since 2012, so like 13 years or so. And we've been podcasting for the last couple years. We're kicking back off the podcast now, and we have written several books in the meantime. And we are going through one of our books called Saturnian Sex Magick. It's the word Saturn and Sex Magick together, Saturnian Sex Magick. It's the name of the podcast, but it's also a book that we wrote. And so we're going through that right now. And today we're going to be talking a little bit more about the deeper meaning of bondage. And it comes from a chapter 5 in our book, where we talk about more than rope and restraint. Most people find their way to BDSM through the surface level thrill of kink. And, that's completely valid. And maybe it starts with a mental image like hands tied above their head, wrists are bound with silk scarves or whatever. The heart pounding vulnerability of surrender or the tight, reassuring grip of leather cuffs. There's a certain glamour to all of it. A promise of the forbidden, the taboo. Ooh. And it's easy to assume that that's all there is. And a lot of people will come to BDSM for kink, and it's kind of temporary, and it leaves them kind of empty. And that's why we like to combine the esoteric with BDSM, because it marries together very well, and it gives you more than just kink. It doesn't leave you feeling empty. It leaves you satisfied and coming back for more, because it taps into parts of yourself that help transform you. So you come for the rope, the chains, the leather, the spectacle, but if you stick around long enough, you start to sense that there's something else at work. There's something much deeper than knots and rope and cuffs and stockades and cages and all these other kinds of bondage things. Now, bondage in its simplest form is, in fact, the act of restraint. But in reality, it's also a language. It's a way of expressing trust, vulnerability, and intimacy that often goes unspoken in other parts of our lives. It's a ritual, a dance, a negotiation of power and care that can feel really old, like an old soul. For many, the first time they've been tied up or they do the tying of somebody else, it awakens something familiar. Not just a sexual thrill, but a kind of recognition. They say to themselves, I've been looking for this, even if I didn't know what to call it. If kink is the hook, bondage is often the line that reels us into a much bigger story. But to really understand what bondage means in the context of BDSM, you have to take a closer look at how we got here. People often talk about the origins of our community. They're often trying to assemble a puzzle, but with missing pieces. So you'll see a lot of TikToks and a lot of YouTube videos, and even some of ours, where we talk about the history, but oftentimes people don't know that there are puzzle pieces missing in that history. And that's not just an excuse, that's a statement of fact. Very people early on thought to keep records of this stuff, to document their scenes, or to treat their erotic lives of part of a broader cultural history. Oftentimes we are doing the history, we don't stop to record the history that we're doing. So much of what we know is cobbled together from personal stories, fading photographs, the rare survivor who remembers what it was like. Within BDSM, the lost is especially acute because of the AIDS crisis in the 1980s. See, a lot of our BDSM history comes out of gay old guard leather culture, and entire communities were wiped out, taking with them decades of stories and lots of traditions. These leather folk and kinksters were the ones who first shaped the outlines of what would become modern BDSM. And today they're more about rumor than reality for many of us. People will say, oh, old guard didn't exist. Old guard's a myth. Well, those people existed and they had traditions and things, but we don't know about a lot of them because we lost a lot of them along the way. And they were busy doing the history and not stopping to record the history. And yet, it's from those fragments that we can start to understand why bondage became so central, why any of this is important, and why it's more than just a kink among many. So, before BDSM was a single concept, we talked about it a little bit in our last episode that there were two distinct subcultures, and they may not have used these titles for themselves. Like I said, they were busy doing the stuff. They weren't stopping to record all the things. So hindsight is sometimes often 2020. We can see a lot clearer on looking back than they perhaps saw themselves. There was the B&D crowd, bondage and discipline, whose interests centered on bondage and discipline, and they were less focused on pain. Not saying they weren't at all, but just less focused on that, and more on the structure of their relationships. For them, bondage wasn't just a way to immobilize someone, it was a way to create and explore their power dynamics, to formalize their roles, to build rituals of care and control. In many ways, they were the archetypes of what we now call master/slave or dominant/submissive relationships that we have today. And those are gendered terms, master and slave sometimes, but it really relates to people of all genders and whatever titles you or honorifics a dominant person uses, master, mistress, dame, goddess, whatever they want to use, sir, ma'am, all the different ones. On the other side were the S&M folks, whose play revolved mostly around pain, around sensation, around the emotional highs and lows that come from pushing personal limits. And for them, the thrill was in the intensity of the experience, the catharsis, the transformation that happens when pain becomes pleasure. Their scenes could be brutal, ecstatic, or both, but they were less preoccupied with structure and more with sensation, more with the kink. Now, at some time, these two worlds began to intersect. People realized that what they were doing wasn't so different after all, that bondage could be a way to enhance sensation, that pain could be a path to a deeper power exchange. Slowly, the lines blurred and the communities merged. The acronym BDSM was born out of all of this, capturing this full range of these overlapping interests. But the fact that B comes first really isn't an accident. It's a reflection of the central role that bondage, and by extension, the power dynamics and trust it represents, has always played in our world of BDSM. So, what does it mean to say bondage is about more than rope, more than cuffs, more than a cage? At its core, bondage is about the negotiation of power, about who gives, who receives, and how both parties find meaning and satisfaction in that exchange. The act of being tied up is just the surface. The real action is happening underneath. When someone allows themselves to be bound, they're making a statement. They're saying, I trust you. When someone ties another, they're taking on responsibility. In essence, they say, I will care for you, even as I control you. A lot of people don't look at it that way. They don't stop to think. They get hung up on the tools and the techniques. But we, because we combine things like the esoteric and BDSM, and we try to really figure the things out, we stop and do this for you. And we bring this to you. That's what makes us unique. You will not find this on any other channel, any other podcast, any other YouTube, any other TikTok. You won't find this stuff elsewhere. I promise you that. If you do, you'll find bits and pieces, but they will not have our unique flavor. And so, but we want that to change. We want more people to be talking about how bondage is I trust you and how bondage is I will care for you. That's what we want. We want to see BDSM take a turn and go for this better, higher road. We want it to see BDSM become the sex magic that we know that it is. So that's why bondage scenes often feel so intimate, even when they look extreme to outsiders. The process of tying, the attention to detail, the care in checking that, making sure that circulation, the constant communication, it becomes its own form of connection. For people who struggle to let go in daily life, to surrender in any way, the act of being bound can be a profound relief to all of that. For those who crave control, the act of tying can be just as meaningful. It's a way to say, I see you, I understand what you need, and I'm going to give it to you, but at the same time, I'm going to keep you safe. This is why so many people who come to BDSM for the thrill of kink, they end up staying around for something more. They may not know it, they may not realize it, they may not understand the communication that is happening in their brain and in their heart and in their emotions. They may not be putting words to it, in other words. It's not just about the physical sensation, it's about the emotion and the psychological resonance. It's about the frequency, to use a new age term. It's about the frequency of BDSM. The ropes become a metaphor for the ties that bind us each together, for the ways we care for, the way we challenge and support our partners. It's not just about ropes. It's not just about cuffs. It's about connection. Part of what makes bondage so enduring is its ritualistic nature. Like any good ritual, it's repeatable, but never quite the same twice. There's a rhythm to it. The gathering of the supplies, laying out the rope, laying out the cuffs, laying out the tools that you're going to use, the little clippy things that clip the cuffs together, the negotiation of limits and desires. Every scene is a small act of creation. It's a way of saying, this is our world, and we make the rules. Some people love the technical side of all of it, the knots, the patterns, the aesthetics, the little lines that it leaves on your body, the marks. There's a whole subculture devoted to things like shibari, which treats rope work like it's calligraphy or arranging flowers. For the others, the appeal is less about how it looks and more how it feels. There's a real meditative quality to being tied up, the slow restriction of your movement, being able to focus on your breath, being very present in the moment, the growing sense of surrender, the way that the world narrows down to just that sensation, just that breath. But even the most elaborate bondage scenes always come back to the same question. What do you want? What do you need? The act becomes a way to explore those questions together, to discover what lies beneath the surface of desire, beyond beyond the fears that we bring to the table. In that sense, bondage isn't just a kink, it's a tool for self discovery, a way to dig deeper into what makes us tick. Kind of as we wrap up here, why did bondage, of all things, rise to the top of our acronym? Why did it become the B in BDSM? Well, the answer is that bondage is both specific and universal. It's an act that anyone can try, regardless of gender, orientation, experience level. It could be just the holding someone down or the telling someone to stay still. It's a way to explore power and vulnerability, to create rituals of care, control, to build trust and intimacy. It's both a practice and a metaphor. It's a way to say, I'm yours at this moment, or you're mine at this moment. It's a way to kind of express temporary ownership or ownership in this present time. Bondage endures because it speaks to something fundamental in all of us. It's the desire to connect, the need to trust or establish trust, to surrender, to control. It's a way to turn all these abstract ideas into a concrete, into a visible or invisible ties that bind us together. When you strip away all of the labels and the jargon, what's left is a simple truth. We all want to be seen. We all want to be held. We all want to be known. I'm Master Sander, and thank you for joining me for this BDSM United podcast, where we're going through our book, Saturnian Sex Magick. I hope you can see that it's some really good stuff in here. I hope that you'll spend the $17 or so. It's a 300 and something page book. Not really trying to sell you something, but I want to plug it because it's something cool and something important and something we feel is worthwhile. And so you can find the link to it at bdsmunited.com. That's BDSM and then the word united, UNITED, united.com. And thank you for joining me for this episode, and I'll see you on another one.